believes. If you had that taken away from you, it would be a massive loss for most of us. Almost all of us go every day without really stopping to think about just how important it is to us.
Audible presents The Body, a guide for occupants, written and read by Bill Bryson, including original bonus material exclusively available at Audible. Listen free as part of your 30-day trial, $7.99 a month after 30 days, renews automatically.
The relaxing sound of fresh, cold running water. And you can have it in your kitchen with amazing savings on Samsung fridge freezers at Currys PC World, like the RB31 with its chilled water dispenser for only $3.99, or upgrade to the Samsung RS8000 American-style fridge freezer with water and ice dispenser. A huge 609 litres of storage space at just $104.9. How relaxing at Currys PC World. Energy rating A+. T's and C's apply.
US manufacturing activity fell to its lowest in more than a decade in September. The ISM index came in at 47.8 as worries mounted over the impact of a trade war with China. The reading below 50 also indicates the manufacturing sector contracted over the period, and we saw that reaction on Wall Street yesterday to the data. Bruce Jenkins-Jones staying with us, co-head of listed equities, executive director at Impacts Asset Management, and Stephen Isaacs, chairman of the investment committee at Alvine Capital. I know that, Stephen, you want to weigh in on the Swiss saga, as Jeff's been reporting live from Credit Suisse headquarters. What jumps out most to you about this?
Well, if you kind of just move away from the spying scandal, which I think has been perhaps too much copy on, and actually focus on what's really going on amongst the Swiss banks, and the point is that they're battling it out on wealth management. That's what they've identified as the sort of last business that they really can excel at. Tian was brought in as an outsider, complete outsider in the very, very closed world of the German Swiss banking. And he's done a pretty good job. If you contrast what happened to Deutsche Bank in a similar period, he's put the big Swiss bank on the right path. But here now, I think his position is much more vulnerable. I mean, essentially, Iqbal Khan, is the go-to, is the senior wealth management banker in Switzerland. Tian was very clever to bring him on and give him the oxygen to create the unit within Credit Suisse. But then when it came to actually kind of perhaps stand aside and say, this guy's going to have you to the top, Tian was very, very sort of emphatic and very personal about blocking him. And that really isn't acceptable, I believe. So I think there's two things. I think Tian is unfortunately going to be on the way out. He's done the right job. He's got Credit Suisse going in the right direction, but he's not the right person to take the bank forward. As an outsider, which is always going to be difficult in the very closed world of Swiss banking. And secondly, I think that it shows to some extent the kind of semi-desperation between UBS and Credit Suisse about their business model, and which is true generally across the whole banking industry, is that with the exception of wealth management, the industry really is in trouble, and there isn't that much wealth management to go around.
I think we've seen that from Julius Baer. We've also seen it from the Deutsche side, Deutsche Wealth Management. Jump in, Bruce.
Yeah, so, wealth management absolutely seems to everybody's strategy. It's sort of consistent with the way we see the world. As everybody gets older, there's greater demand for wealth management services. It's a very compelling business model. Just anecdotally, it's also interesting, we've seen just in our little world of sustainability, huge amount of competition from exactly those banks trying to develop products which increasingly is what the customers want. It's something that offers them more diversification, but also a focus on sustainability.
You spend more time than any of us around the table looking at how that space gets disrupted by technology. What do you think? What do those profit margins look like? They might be worth chasing at this point, but do you think that changes in future?
Well, there's no doubt there's plenty of fat in there. It's a very, very high margin business, but at the same time, it's everybody's strategy. You can expect to see more competition. Inevitably, there's got to be some competition for fees. Fees have got to come down in that wealth management industry.
Wealth management, in particular in Switzerland, has come into focus on the back of negative rates. We heard from the Swiss banks that they're looking to pass on negative rates to their wealthy customers. And perhaps, Stephen, we could talk a little bit about the impact of negative rates. I know during the break we were chatting about it, and you're pretty negative when it comes to the impact on the real economy.
Well, this is a complete experiment. I mean, we've had a couple of moments in the last 25 years when there have been negative rates for a few months in sort of crisis scenarios, but we've never had a modern economy with negative rates for potentially years. So we don't know how customers, consumers, businesses are going to behave. In Germany in particular, back to my sort of favourite bête noire, this word strafins, which means like punishment rate, has become a very controversial issue. The reality is, as you said, that as these rates start to get passed on, because banks just simply can't afford to subsidise their customers, it's kind of rolling out through society and creating a big political controversy. But also what concerns me is if you move the discount rate to below zero, what does it do to, for instance, insurance company liabilities? What does it do for the incentive for businesses to actually invest? To my mind, it's a horribly destructive reality. And I just am very concerned about how this plays out in Europe.
Bruce, we're going to let you go in a moment, and I know that you've got quite a number of themes you want to touch on, from climate change to low-impact foods, electric vehicles, plastics. What's the most compelling idea you can leave with investors?
Well, I think given the conversation we've just been having, I think we need to keep our eye on climate change. You've got with this election coming up next year. Donald Trump's completely dismissed it as something that's not happening, but you can see there's momentum building both within the Democratic Party, coming up with some extraordinarily aggressive policies, Elizabeth Warren in particular, and the other side of the Republican Party also talking increasingly about a carbon tax. So I think everybody needs to be aware of climate change risk, both on the policy side, particularly in focus coming up in 2020, but at the same time with the extraordinary weather we're seeing, the wildfires, the floods, the droughts, etc., all around the place. This is something that I think investors need to think about with regard to adaptation and resilience of their portfolio. So I think climate change very much on the agenda.
We're going to book you to come in the studio and talk specifically about that impact for investors. Again, thank you very much. Bruce Jenkins-Jones with us, co-head of Listed Equities, Executive Director, Impact Asset Management. The EU's Trade Commissioner has told CNBC the US could impose tariffs on European goods as soon as this month if it's granted permission to do so from the WTO. But Cecilia Malmström says the bloc would seek to retaliate almost immediately. Let's get out to Willem for more in Brussels. Willem, extraordinary tape I saw yesterday of Mike Pompeo meeting with Giuseppe Conte in Italy, and effectively Pompeo be given this big block of cheese to demonstrate from one journalist that there will be a backlash for some of those Italian farmers, Italian manufacturers in the space of tariffs are imposed. Just give us a sense of where the story is going to turn next and what the impact of those tariffs will be.
Yeah, of course, Karen, the context for that is that cheese was one of the items on a list drawn up by the US Trade Representative's Office back in April that could, in theory, face tariffs if this WTO ruling goes ahead this week and if the US decides to include cheese in the list of European products that it would like to see tariffs added to. Of course, it'll be US consumers that are paying more for their Parmigiano Reggiano the journalist gave to Mike Pompeo. But in terms of the reaction from Europe, Cecilia Malmström talking yesterday after meeting with European trade ministers, she said, look, there's been some quite mixed messaging out of this White House in terms of what they'd like to see long-term in their relationship with Europe.
Some prominent representatives of the US administration have said recently that they would like to use the incoming new commission and that moment to restore a new positive momentum in our relations. I think an excellent way to do that concretely would be to refrain from having these tariffs and other tariffs as well. There are too many tariffs in the world. It's not good for neither the European economy, neither the American economy. So still that is plan A, to try to avoid them. When it comes to our possible countermeasures, we are looking at all options. And there are some old cases where the appellate body has judged as late as in the spring that the US is still not complying with old cases. So we're looking at everything. It doesn't mean that we will use these possibilities, but everything is on the table.
So brief context for those possibilities that are on the table. We're expecting this ruling against Airbus. And then a few months from now, we're expecting a similar ruling against Boeing. After the ruling this week, the US can, in theory, impose tariffs, billions of dollars worth of European products. But theoretically, the Europeans would have to wait until that Boeing ruling, which could be in the spring, for them to impose retaliatory measures. However, what Cecilia Malmström was talking about there is the possibility they would use old WTO rulings, findings against the US that they've not acted on in the past, to try and take measures before that Boeing ruling comes out. That, in theory, would give the Europeans, I should say, more leverage in their discussions with the Trump White House when it comes to try and find a long-term settlement to this ongoing dispute about civilian aircraft subsidies and tax concessions, guys.
Willem, thank you very much for fleshing out the detail. And again, we will await that ruling. Well, we're going to take a short break, but coming up on the show, we'll speak with Covestro CEO Markus Steelmann as the chemicals maker faces concerns over a slowdown in the German economy. That's a First On interview next.
Time is money. Or so money says. Well, money. I know you like to dictate every hour of every day, add to my to-do list and throw the odd spanner in the works. But not anymore. This is my business, and I run it on my watch. I'm in control now, money. And times are changing. Save time with instant business invoicing, now on the Barclays app. Search Barclays Business and make money work for you.
Must have a Barclays business account. T's and C's apply.
Today, your information is more exposed than ever. When you shop, sign in, or browse, you could be vulnerable to cybercriminals. More online threats demand more protection. That's why new Norton 360 provides multiple layers of protection, combining device security, secure VPN, password manager, and cloud backup all in one solution. Get new Norton 360, starting at $24.99 for the first year.
Get ready for Brexit on the 31st of October. Find out what you need to do to prepare at gov.uk/Brexit.
Rescue stressed, irritated skin with Estee Lauder's newest innovation, Advanced Night Repair Intense Reset Concentrate. Rescue and reset the look of skin with SOS technology. Skin feels instantly calmed, soothed and strengthened, revealing a more radiant, smooth and rested look. Face life head on with Estee Lauder's new Advanced Night Repair Intense Reset Concentrate. Why not try it for yourself? Head to your nearest Estee Lauder counter for a free SOS mini facial. The relaxing sound of fresh, cold running water. And you can have it in your kitchen. With amazing savings on Samsung fridge freezers at Currys PC World. Like the RB31 with its chilled water dispenser for only $3.99. Or upgrade to the Samsung RS8000 American-style fridge freezer with water and ice dispenser. A huge 609 litres of storage space. At just $104.9. How relaxing. At Currys PC World. Energy rating A+. T's and C's apply.
Get social with TuneIn. Follow TuneIn on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram to discover what's happening in the app and around the world. Be the first to know about upcoming games and the hottest new music. Follow at TuneIn and always be in the know.
The global sell-off spreads to Europe after US manufacturing activity falls to a decade low and the Dow wipes out all of its third quarter gains on the first day of Q4. Tesco shares slumped to a 3-week low as CEO Dave Lewis announces his departure after 6 years in the role, offsetting better than expected profits in the first half. The FTSE 100 on track for its worst day in 6 weeks as Boris Johnson prepares to reveal his final Brexit offer to the European Union and rules out asking for a delay. Demonstrations continue in Hong Kong after an 18-year-old protester is shot by police during some of the territory's worst violence in 17 weeks of anti-government protests.
Markets in Europe have been open for about a half an hour now, and the Stoxx 600 is currently down nearly 1%. So adding to the losses that accumulated yesterday, things turned negative, of course, after that weaker than expected ISM manufacturing print out of the U.S. We saw a downturn in European stocks, with the Stoxx 600 closing about 1.3% lower. Also a step down on Wall Street, and then in the overnight session, the Asian markets trading weaker as well. So the losses continue to build. The second day of trade in the final quarter of the year. October, of course, typically the most volatile month of the year, historically speaking, and so far we're looking at a weaker start to that month. So let's dive in now to the sectors and see what the split looks like this morning. Red across the board with the exception of travel and leisure, which is up about 0.4%. Now, we are seeing a defensive tilt to trade this morning with food and bev, real estate, telcos, and utilities at the top of the board, but again, still in negative territory. But the underperformance really coming from those cyclical sectors sectors: industrials, insurance, chemicals, construction, and basic resources. So very clear sort of trend we're seeing come through markets. And this is right in line with what we saw on Wall Street, where industrials underperformed and those consumer staples names outperformed. And again, this comes alongside a strong bid for safe haven assets, with the yen being a key beneficiary right alongside gold. Let's dive into the single stocks this morning. A number of stories on the succession front at Standard Life Aberdeen and Tesco. Tesco shares now trading about 1.5% higher here. We saw better than expected results, but then the surprise when it comes to the departure of the CEO. Covestro shares trading down about 4% on the board there, and chemicals more broadly also trading lower as investors pull their money out of those cyclical parts of the market. So that's the story now, about a half an hour into trade. Karen?
Juliana, thank you. The US-China trade war is not the only reason for the slowdown in the global economy, according to Angela Merkel. The German Chancellor says Europe must also shoulder the blame, pointing specifically to prolonged uncertainty stemming from the ongoing Brexit negotiations. Merkel said people still don't know what supply chains will look like after Britain leaves the EU.
Meanwhile, Germany's finance minister Olaf Scholz says his country will be able to withstand an economic crisis, but cautioned he does not expect to see a downturn as bad as 2008. Scholz told broadcaster ARD Berlin is prepared with countermeasures if necessary. Germany is teetering on the brink of recession, with many predicting the country's leading economic institutes will cut growth forecasts for 2019 and 2020 later today. Now, joining us now to talk more about the state of the German economy and the chemical sector is Markus Stielmann, CEO of Covestro, who joins us now. Thanks very much for joining us. Before we get into Germany, I want to start on China. This is a major market for you guys. I believe about 20% of your sales, and I visited your production site in Shanghai, quite a substantial operation there. And I see that you're continuing to invest there, just last week announcing an enhancement to that innovation center you've got in Shanghai. So are you not concerned about the US-China trade war and the potential that this could have on Western investment in China?
Very good morning, and thanks for having me in the show. And what you are referring to is a very, let's say, large topic for us, for sure, because the overall economy and the overall development is very challenging these days. Yet, on the other hand, we believe that our product and also what we deliver to human mankind in terms of serving their needs is exactly mid to long term going into the right direction. And that's why we also have recently invested in our research and development center also in China, because a lot of the developments that we are globally seeing in terms of renewable energy, in terms of less energy consumption, in terms of also going for different ways of mobility, like electromobility, is happening at a rapid and massive speed in China. And that's why we believe it is also good that we increase our regional footprint there, as we do, by the way, in the United States, as we do in Europe, because that is one of the strengths of Covestro. We are, with our assets, with our R&D facilities and capabilities, where the markets are.
Are you seeing signs of slowdown in China in your end markets there?
Yeah, definitely. We have seen slowdowns in the automotive industry. You can tell, I mean, the data are obvious and they're speaking a very clear language. Yet we are also very positively looking into different propulsion systems. What does that mean? So we are going from combustion engines into battery-driven vehicles, electromobility, and that is where we provide a lot of materials, for example, for battery housing. We are looking into materials that go into more energy-efficient light sources like LED lightings, and that is why we have put our R&D center and increased our R&D center facilities in China, exactly to benefit from those trends also mid to long term. Short term, the situation is very challenging.
Marcus, looking over some of the broker research notes, it's a confusing bunch. It's almost like one of those old-fashioned scales where you put a weight on one side and then you put a weight on the other, and somehow you sort of get to a point where one outweighs the other. And just to the point of Bank of America Merrill Lynch, they're effectively saying, well, investors are overlooking some of the risks with the commoditization that's occurring, particularly around polycarbonates in the business, but then match that up against Goldman Sachs, that's been looking at a positive earnings revision bias because of constructive pricing in the sector. What would you say about some of the risks and the positives that you're facing in the business.
Yeah. So we are in a cyclical industry. So we're serving the automotive industry, we're serving the construction industry, and also we from time to time deal also with oversupply situations in our industry, and that is a fact. And we must not ignore this fact. But we are very well prepared to master also the cyclicalities because we have leading cost positions no matter where we invest, no matter in which product we invest. And in times of cyclicality and in times where you get under price and margin pressure, it is important that you have leading cost positions. That's one hand of the story. So as an investor, if you're looking on the cyclicality, on a commoditized character of business, I think the analysis gives a good picture that there is margin pressure and that there is also a need to adjust your cost structures, which we are currently doing. And yet there is another picture, and that other picture is we have wonderful materials in our portfolio that go for future trends. As I said, lightweight materials, materials that help to make renewable energy more cost competitive, but also materials that help us to make buildings more energy effective and electrical devices more energy effective. Every refrigerator in the world contains material that comes from Covestro. Just to think about it, how much energy we save. And that picture draws a different line, which is there is lots of future potential for growth. And that is exactly what you see reflected in both reports.
Your response suggests you're laser focused on the cycle. And one, point and one factor reaction we've seen in this cycle is that companies are cutting their investment. They simply do not believe that the cycle justifies the amount of investment. Analysts also look in your company saying, well, if you cut capex, that would bolster your cash generation. What do you think? Do you think you're going to review some of the capex programs?
We're permanently reviewing all our capex programs because for us it is very important that on the one hand we serve short and midterm needs and also make sure that our shareholders see the benefits of the growth and success of our company.
That's company speak, but in this cycle, are you taking another look over it?
Well, I'm representing a company, so you will hear companies speak. So in that sense, it is really important that we really look at short to midterm, looking that our shareholders have benefits from what we're doing. That's why we have a very stable and progressive dividend policy on the one hand. On the other hand, our assets running for 50 years. So we are not steering our business quarter by quarter only, but we also have to look at assets that we have to invest for the next 50 years. And I myself actually have seen now 3 cycles in my short career of just 2 decades in the company. And I can tell you there's a lot of very positive signals mid to long term that especially our materials that we are investing, for example, MDI in the United States, which is one of the materials that helps to conserve energy and make energy effective buildings, is exactly investing into this future growth markets. And that's why we're doing it. So we're balancing short-term needs and long-term needs at the same time.
Now, on the point about where you're investing, you mentioned the MDI facility in Texas. M&A has also been a key topic since you came into the role back in June 2018. And I know the investment community, analyst community, has long speculated whether you would be interested in adding a fourth leg. You've got polycarbonates, polyurethanes, and CAS at the moment. Where do you stand? I mean, given you guys are a relatively young company, you've only come to the market as a standalone in 2015, you don't have much of a track record when it comes to M&A. So how should investors think about your appetite for doing more of a transformational deal?
We do M&A not for the sake of M&A and just to have something, for example, on my CV that I can say, well, we did M&A during my tenure. That's not the point. The point is, would it create value? And that's the only decisive criteria. This is not even going for a fourth leg, for example. It is really to say, where could we, the better owners to some business that are out there? We have made small steps also to make sure that investors understand we're taking a careful stand on that. For example, we increased the share that we had in an existing joint venture from 50 to 80%. But we also have done a lot, let's say, recently on disinvesting business that doesn't fit our portfolio. For example, recently in some of the polycarbonates areas. So we are taking a very proactive stand, but also making sure that investors understand we're not doing M&A just for the sake of M&A. It has to create value, so we use a sharpened pencil, and that's what I'm standing for.
Now, I promised we would come back to Germany, of course, where you're headquartered. What's your take on what we're seeing in Germany at the moment, the sort of health of the German economy, and what should happen now? It's obviously in a bit of a slump here.
Yeah, well, it's difficult to say, in which direction, because all the German industries are export industries. There's hardly any industry that's just representing a local market. So what you see in the world is also partially reflected in Germany, and the automotive industry plays a very important role. The chemical industry is the 3rd largest industry in the German economy, and that is where we are part of. And we're seeing currently also the challenges that we see globally in Germany. So from that perspective, for me, it is very important to make sure that we understand how we master this current challenging environment, and I think we're doing very well in this context.
All right. Well, thank you very much for joining us, weighing in on a range of topics. That's Marcus Steelman, CEO of Covestro.
In the meantime, the Hong Kong University Students' Union has released footage of an 18-year-old protester being shot by police. Just a warning for our viewers, some of you may find these pictures disturbing. CBC does not know what happened before the recording began, but yesterday's anti-government protests were violent at times. The city's police commissioner has defended the officer and said he acted in self-defense. The teenager remains in hospital while students are gathering for a sit-in at his school. Let's get out to Sherry for more out of Hong Kong. Sherry, huge focus yesterday around these demonstrations as National Day played out in China. The big question is what happens next from the Chinese side, whether there could be a further response from Beijing. Question marks for a lot of investors.
That's right. I mean, still a lot of question marks, and many of them that I cannot answer at this point. Remember, yesterday, China's National Day was some sort of a deadline for our viewers, investors, as well as many others who are watching Hong Kong's unrest as, perhaps, to gauge China's tolerance of a dissent in one of its territories. But we didn't really see any resolution of any kind of anything, further escalation in a violation. And you were talking about the shooting incident as well. Earlier this summer, we did have a couple of warning shots fired by police officers, but all that were actually in the air, skyward, but this is the very first time a person was shot in this arrest. So certainly a main headline driver of this morning in the aftermath. And we did see hundreds of office workers in Hong Kong, as well as schoolmates of that 18-year-old protester who is now in hospital, taking to the streets, denouncing police shooting of that protester. And what we do know at this point is that the Hong Kong government says that the protester who was shot by the police officer yesterday is in a stable condition at the moment, while adding that the police officer acted in self-defense and within the boundary of police guidelines. At the same time, the police also coming out with a video statement just hours after the incident yesterday, saying that police felt that the lives were under threat. But where we're getting conflicting reports is exactly where the protester was shot. According to the police, it was the shoulder area, but some in the local media say that he was shot on the left side of his chest by this live round. And while we're getting that, of course, the conflicting reports, is that going to provide further catalyst? Since we're getting some angry criticisms from some in public of Hong Kong, I think that's something that we need to watch carefully here, especially as, one of the core demands has been independent inquiry into the police behavior or action this summer in terms of policing the protesters as one of the key demands that is being made by the protesters so far this year. In the meantime, we're getting some interesting reaction from a business side as well. The Hong Kong General Chamber of Commerce strongly condemning the grave violence and vandalism, saying, quote, extremist chilling disregard for the rule of law is not only affecting Hong Kong's reputation as an international financial and business center, but also crippling many small businesses as well. Guys, back to you.
Sherry, thank you very much for the latest. We're going to take a short break, but coming up on the show, find out why Mark Zuckerberg says he'll take U.S. presidential candidate Elizabeth Warren to the mat over her plans to crack down on big tech. More after the break.
Now get greedy whenever you want. Subscribe to the American Greed.
At Harefield Hospital's private facilities, we provide short-notice heart and lung appointments whenever you need us, along with advanced diagnostics and pioneering treatments with our leading experts. Whether it's a heart or lung health screening, or to see one of our expert heart and lung consultants, we provide you with specialist private healthcare, quickly, expertly, and conveniently. Book a private appointment today at Harefield Hospital by visiting rbhh-specialistcare.co.uk.
At Argos, save 25% off homewares across thousands of lines. Our autumn-winter home and furniture collection is here. So stylish, you can wear it. With Argos, you're good to go. Offer ends 8th of October. Conditions apply. Subject to availability. Selected lines. The relaxing sound of fresh, cold running water. And you can have it in your kitchen. With amazing savings on Samsung fridge freezers at Currys PC World. Like the RB31 with its chilled water dispenser for only $399. Or upgrade to the Samsung RS8000 American-style fridge freezer with water and ice dispenser. A huge 609 litres of storage space. At just $1,049. How relaxing. At Currys PC World. Energy rating A+. T's and C's apply.
College football is live on TuneIn. Listen for free to games from more than 140 schools all season long.
To the 10, all the way to the checkerboards, but he stays on his feet and scores.
What's happening in college football this week, this Saturday? The scoreboard will be working overtime as Sam Ellinger brings his vaunted Texas Longhorns passing attack to West Virginia for a Big 12 conference matchup against the Mountaineers. The action starts at 3:30 p.m. Eastern. Just search college to listen today.
You love TuneIn for live breaking news from CNN, MSNBC, Fox, CNBC, and more. But when you can't catch your favorite show as it airs, it might just be a click away as a podcast. Search your favorite news station to explore all the on-demand news shows on TuneIn.
ESPN Radio and TuneIn just go hand in hand. Hi, this is Mel Kiper Jr. reminding you that all of your favorite ESPN radio shows and events are right here on TuneIn. Just search ESPN Radio to begin enjoying today.
Hey, NFL fans, can't watch the game? Can't be there? We've got you covered. With TuneIn Premium, you can hear every NFL game live as it's happening, or catch it later on demand, anytime, anywhere, all season long.
Stuck in traffic during the big game? With TuneIn Premium, you can listen to your favorite NFL team on the go. No TV required. Even during rush hour, you won't miss a single touchdown. Listen to the NFL on TuneIn Premium today.
Facebook CEO Mark Zuckerberg says Democratic presidential candidate Elizabeth Warren would be bad for big tech if she's elected. In a leaked audio recording from a July meeting, Zuckerberg added he would take Warren, quote, to the mat over her plans to break up the world's largest social media company. Elizabeth joins us with more. That saying suggests a hard fight, but also what this throws sort of question marks around where big tech lies, because the Democrats